I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And welcome back to Nate Hates Submarine Movies.
Yeah. Also known as Rob and Nate Reports Podcast. This is week 3 of War Movies Month.
I was actually going to start it over. Do you want to keep it running?
Okay, whatever.
No, it's fine. You can keep running.
All right, we're going with it. I picked the war and movie this week. We are doing the 1987 film Full Metal Jacket, directed by Stanley Kubrick, who also directed our first film, the World War I movie, Paths of Glory. I was telling Rob that I subtly snuck in a mini theme month, Stanley Kubrick theme month into War Movie Month. Unlike Paths of Glory, which I've seen many times, I had never seen Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah. You'd seen parts of it, right?
Clips in documentaries about Stanley Kubrick is probably the extent of my knowledge.
I had seen scenes out of this movie, but just a couple scenes.
So this movie is based on a novel by a man named Gustav Hasford. It was his first of about 3 novels that he wrote. He died relatively young. Heart attack, complications from diabetes at the age of 45.
Wow.
But it seems like from what I scanned on Wikipedia, he was kind of a troubled soul.
The novel it's based on is called The Short Timers.
Yeah, which came out in 1979, about 8 years before this film was made. Even though he is credited as one of the co-writers of the screenplay, there have been questions about how much he was really involved, and apparently he refused to show up to the Oscars for it, even though they were nominated. Kubrick has a reputation of being very loose in his adaptations, and so I wonder how much of the novel is in the movie. Should we do first impressions or just a brief summary of what this is about?
Keep on with the summary first.
All right, so this movie follows a character who goes by the... most of the characters here have nicknames that they get from basic training. He is known as Private Joker. He is played by Matthew Modine. He is in basic training on Parris Island, South Carolina for the Marine Corps for 8 weeks. That's the first 45-ish minutes of this movie. He then travels to Vietnam, where he is a reporter for Stars and Stripes. He had been a writer for his high school newspaper, which apparently is how he ended up with this job. He's kind of an ambivalent fellow. He has mixed feelings about the war. He expresses those by wearing a peace button on his uniform and having the words "Born to Kill" written on his helmet. And it follows after basic training. You have some stuff around, presumably Saigon or wherever they're based with Stars and Stripes for a little bit. And then he goes off on a reporting mission into the field. For a short time, they are followed by a film crew, and there's interview segments. And then they eventually end up in a combat situation in an environment I'm not used to seeing Vietnam combat depicted on, in an urban environment, which is probably the most visually memorable portion of the film. We have a number of sporting characters that come and go. The most well-known is Arlie Emery, who plays Sergeant Hartman,
Gunnery Sergeant
Hartman, who is their drill instructor in basic training, who is, that's a very memorable characterization. I commented to you that around the first 12 to 15 minutes of this movie is just Arlie Emery yelling at these people. And Vincent D'Onofrio is the ill-fated Private Pyle.
I actually really liked him right up to that.
Right up to the point that, and we'll get to that. Adam Baldwin as Animal Mother, Dorian Harwood as 8-Ball, Kevin Major Hauer as Rafterman, Arliss Howard as Private Cowboy, Edo Ross as Lieutenant Touchdown, and on down the line to lesser characters. What were your thoughts? We literally just finished watching this pretty well-known movie. What did you think of it?
I had seen several of the barrack scenes with Arlie Emery and Vincent D'Onofrio. However, I didn't know how that ended.
Yeah.
So I was caught off guard by that, and then I was kind of curious to see where it was going to go from there.
They foreshadowed it a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
There's that scene.
I actually thought it was going to happen, though, after he was in Vietnam.
Yeah, I kind of assumed that, too.
Yeah.
But the early sequences in Did you have more you wanted to say?
No, go ahead.
Early impression? So the early so this is the catch-22 of the movie. The sequences at basic training are so good, they kind of overwhelm the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a distinct, memorable thing. I love the fact that it just the first scene is people having their head shaved for basic training, and they play this patriotic Vietnam song. Have you ever heard some of these songs?
Yes.
People sometimes forget, because when we think of the 60s, we think of Vietnam, we think of the counterculture. The counterculture was the counterculture against the wider culture, which at least in the early phases of the war was pretty supportive. And so there are some, they never get played really anymore, but there are some really interesting gung-ho war songs, and they're playing one of these during the head shaving sequences. Then they go into the basic training. Ermi he is fantastic. He is the ultimate drill instructor he's the platonic ideal of what a drill instructor is. And in fact, that's basically what he did for the rest of his career.
Yeah, this movie so cemented him in that he just continued to do that and just made plenty of money doing that.
I assume he comes from that background, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't recall his full history off the top of my head, actually. Let's click on him and get some of it. But he was in the military. He was in the United States Marine Corps for 11 years. He rose to the rank of Staff Sergeant and later was bestowed with the honorary rank of Gunnery Sergeant by the Marine Corps after he served 14 months in Vietnam and later did 2 tours in Okinawa, Japan. After injuries forced him to retire from the Corps, he moved to the Philippines, enrolling in the University of Manila, where he studied criminology and drama. He appeared in several Filipino films before being cast as a helicopter pilot in Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now. Due to his Vietnam experiences, Coppola also utilized him as a technical advisor. He got a featured role in Sidney J. Fury's The Boys in Company C, playing a drill instructor, and Army worked with Fury again in Purple Hearts, 1984. But again, this is his most famous or infamous role as the Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, for which he was nominated for a Golden Globe. He did win the Best Supporting Actor award from the Boston Society of Film Critics, but since then he went on to appear in numerous character roles in such films as Leaving Las Vegas, Seven, Dead Men Walking. Ermi prefers comedy to drama and has a comedic role in Saving Silverman.
And he passed away in 2018. But he's absolutely fantastic in this, and there's Vincent D'Onofrio plays kind of an overweight guy who, at least early on, is at the bottom of this training group.
So D'Onofrio, especially for the size of his role in this movie, or the amount of the movie he's in, he really committed himself to this. We'll get into it when we get into the trivia, but it took 6 months prior to filming and gained a whole bunch of weight. Mm-hmm. And it took him like 9 months after filming to get the weight back off. But it's just so negatively impacted his life. Like, people, just because of the way he appeared once he gained that weight, like in regular life, people were repeating themselves to him because they assumed that he was of lower intellect.
And that's what this character is. This character is borderline. Well, he's slow.
Yeah. And
he's kind of borderline.
Yeah.
And he just can't take it.
Well, he's taking it up until the point that they have, there's different names for it, a barracks party, a blanket party, but they team up. Somebody takes a sock and uses it basically as a gag. They put it over his mouth, and then they throw a blanket over him in his bunk, and 2 guys hang from the blanket below him so he can't move. And the rest of the guys in their barracks, because they're upset with him because they're getting punished for things that he's doing, they've taken and wrapped their bar of soap in towels and use it as a thing to beat him. And for those that are unfamiliar, a bar of soap in a towel or a couple of socks makes an effective weapon that doesn't leave a lot of surface bruising, but bruises deeply down.
Yeah. Hartman assigns Joker to basically take him under his wing and teach him stuff, and he does a good job, and he improves very significantly over the course of basic training, and he is particularly skilled with his gun. He gets to be very, very good with the gun, and Hartman even says, I might even allow you to be a
rifleman
in my beloved Marines.
Yeah.
And But something along the line cracked.
It's that blanket party. It's after that he's got that look in his eye from then on.
They foreshadow it a bit in one of Hartman's lectures where he talks about
The sniper.
Charles Whitman,
Yeah.
who has been referenced on this podcast before in our episode about targets, who took a gun from the tower at the University of Texas and killed a whole bunch of people. We don't usually say when we are recording these episodes, but we're recording this on the 26th of May, 2022. Just yesterday there was that school shooting in Texas, which added a certain surrealness as it started to become clear that there was going to be a shooting. But anyway, Hartman talks about how that guy Whitman was trained in the Marines, and how Lee Harvey Oswald was trained in the Marines, and what a Marine officer can do with a gun and some talent.
And his real point is that Marines don't miss their targets.
Yeah.
So even though these guys were famous for bad things, their training in the Marine Corps allowed them to do the thing they did.
And eventually, one night, just on the eve of graduation, Private Joker is assigned nighttime patrol duty. He goes into the restroom, finds Private Pyle, which of course is his nickname, D'Onofrio's character's nickname, in the bathroom working on his gun with a deranged look in his eyes, and eventually Hartman comes in. He doesn't have another mode, so he's confrontational.
Well, he starts soft and then goes hard. Yeah.
And he gets shot and killed. And then Pyle sits on a toilet and kills himself. And then we cut to country.
Yeah.
It's quite the transition.
Jump. Yeah.
But yeah, that basic training stuff is it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And the rest of the movie is good, but it just doesn't have the same power.
Well, and one thing that's worth noting about that scene while we're on it, Stanley Kubrick is well known for expecting people to deliver the lines as written and not allowing people to deviate a lot from the script. However, R. Lee Ermey was so good in this role, in his character, that they didn't give him a script. He was just improvising the entire time. And apparently the barracks scenes were all filmed in like 2 or 3 takes only, even though it was purely improvised.
Yeah.
It came naturally to him. He was clearly as effective in that role. And yeah.
He is just a smith of insults in this. He's just very, very expert at it.
Yep.
It's very, very enjoyable to watch.
Yeah. In a masochistic way.
It is, because you're watching it, you're enjoying it, but you're also kind of like,
as long as it's not me.
Yeah, it's like, I wouldn't want to be, yeah. But these nicknames that he gives these characters stick with them. Our principal character, of course, is Private Joker, but Cowboy, the Arliss Howard character, is kind of the secondary or third lead in it. Him and Joker become pretty friendly with each other. They are the first two to see that Pyle is breaking. They have that discussion about it when cleaning in the bathroom. They're like, I don't think he's gonna make it.
He's gonna go Section 8.
Yeah, which I assume is mental, right?
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into Vietnam.
Yeah, so it flashes forward to Vietnam. Everyone's got their hair back. Private Joker is with Rafterman, and they're approached by a prostitute, and you see that Joker's still a Joker.
Yeah.
And then it goes back to this headquarters scene where they're meeting with what I assume is effectively their editor. And they're talking about assignments and articles that they've written, and Joker's making jokes. But they're talking about potential stories, and he's talking about this possible offensive. And his editors basically and superior officers telling him this is nothing. This is a scuttlebutt. These rumors go around every year, blah, blah, blah. And then it's exactly what happens.
The Tet Offensive. It took me a little while to kind of place when in the war this was. Some of the songs they were playing early on, Going to Chapel, Gonna Get Married, These Boots Are Made from Walking, these are mid-64, 65 songs. And I assume this was fairly early in the war, but this is 67, 68, as the war is starting to lose its luster. The prostitute scene is actually a fairly famous scene. I think most of us have heard the dialogue kind of parodied.
Yeah.
it was weird to finally see that scene. Like, that's hardly anything. But yeah, the part in the Working for Stars and Stripes, there's just a few little kind of scenes around the town. Rafterman is just super anxious to get out to the field because he's taking photos of people getting medals, and he's like, I haven't been in country yet, and I'm bored, and I want to be out there.
Well, but Private Joker doesn't want him exposed to it.
Yes. And it actually kind of sets it up so you think, oh, he thinks he's going to be up to it. And then when they get out, he's going to just fall apart, which didn't happen. Like, that was the obvious arc. And the fact that Kubrick didn't go that way actually proves to be pretty capable out there.
Once he gets over the initial shock.
Yeah. I liked that. I liked that. I was surprised by it.
Well, and I think that it also lends Rafterman a little bit of, and Joker a little bit of humanity, because like you see as they're flying into this assignment, the door gunner on the helicopter is just shooting civilians.
Yeah.
And that's what's making Rafterman sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Joker clearly is uncomfortable as well. But then when it's actual fighting, Rafterman does his job.
When they arrive to join that unit, the guy that is the commanding officer there just seems like a very reasonable guy. And he's just very fair with him. Like, sometimes you think about, I don't know, you think about people hating their commander or the commander being crazy. Like, this guy was good. He was a former Notre Dame football player.
Yeah, his nickname is Lieutenant Touchdown.
And they head out in country on a mission.
They're supposed to be going to this city or village.
Yeah. What is that? So at the end of the film, there's a protracted sequence where they're in a very urban area. What was that? It's obviously been hit a lot. I mean, it's been
bombed.
Ruined. It's been bombed. I think it's a factory of some sort.
No, I took it as it was like a town.
Well, there was a town, but part of it I felt very industrial. There was a certain part where you could kind of see part of a sign, like a store sign, that might have been some kind of shopping complex.
Yeah, it's not clear what that is, but yeah.
But yeah, I've never seen that before. I've never seen urban fighting in Vietnam in a movie.
I know I have, but I can't think of the movie off the top of my head, so. Yeah.
You always see them out in the rice paddies and out in the jungle.
Well, and yeah, I've heard other stories from veterans. I have a good friend and neighbor who was, in his first tour in Vietnam, was a tunnel rat, which was an unenviable job, and
yeah,
not a lot of those guys made it back. And he, after his first tour, he was pretty sure if he went back as a tunnel rat a second time, he wasn't going to come home.
Yeah.
So he went to school and was trained to basically be a bomb loader on the F-4 Phantoms. And so his second tour in Vietnam, that's what he did, was he was working on the planes, loading bombs and stuff. Mm-hmm. But he tells stories about like being on the beach in Chu Lai, and the Vietnamese were mortaring their camp and their positions, and they would be on their foxholes in the beach yelling at the Vietnamese what corrections to make to actually hit them. And just one of those kind of, I don't know whether to call it gallows humors, but they're like, man, these guys suck. Like, they're not even aiming right. Like, aim this way. And, yeah.
One of the things I liked in this film was the film crew part. It's another thing where they don't give a much really any context. All of a sudden, there's a film crew there. And the 2 Stars and Stripes guys are helping the film crew, and then they're doing...
Well, I think the film crew is from Stars and Stripes.
Yeah, there's something like that.
Yeah.
Something associated with them, but they don't start out there. It's just the 2 of them, and then they're
and you get scenes like that also in, like, Saving Private Ryan and some of the others. Yeah.
But then it becomes a little bit like The Office. It gets to be the interview sequence. I really like that. I can't think of another film where that's done in a war setting. And so you get to kind of talk to these different characters, and have them kind of say their take on things.
Yeah.
I thought it was really effective. It was a little unusual. I really liked it. Yeah.
Yeah, it works. And then as they're making their way through this, whatever this complex is, they're taking sniper fire, and the unit has lost their leadership and it's going further and further down the NCOs, and they have disagreements about what they're going to do.
Yeah. So their leader is killed. Touchdown is killed, And so that leaves Cowboy as the most senior or highest-ranking non-commissioned officer. So he is given command. He's a good commander.
Yeah.
Like, he is reasonable and level-headed. Some of his subordinates, particularly,
Animal Mother.
are not. And so he's trying to hold them back from doing risky things, and two of their men are pinned down. They're probably dead. Animal Mother is like, I'm not going to wait. And so he goes off without permission. They're in a situation where they're pinned down by a sniper. And
who's intentionally wounding the soldiers to get more of them to come.
Yeah.
So they can shoot the others.
And he makes the determination that there's only one sniper. And so Cowboy and a small group, including Joker and Rafterman, go out to investigate the bodies, and Cowboy is shot and killed. And I love the way they do that, because they're hiding, and there's this hole in a wall that they probably didn't really notice when they were gathering together, but the sniper does, and Sniper gets them, which unfortunately leaves Animal Mother in charge. And he says, let's go out and get some revenge. And they eventually track down, they get behind where the sniper is, and of all people, it's Rafterman that shoots her. And then they kind of gather around.
She's wounded, not killed.
Yeah. And it's a woman, and she is dying. She's in a lot of pain, and she asks, shoot me. And there's a dispute about what to do.
Animal Mother wants to leave her for critters to finish off.
Yeah. Whereas Joker, he has empathy. He does, and he thinks we should put her, even though Cowboy was like his best friend.
Yeah.
But he still, it's like, I can't do this. And so he does eventually kill her. And then the movie just kind of ends, but it does so effectively. Like, I don't know how you would end this movie, but the scene where they're walking through the ruins of the town at night, and they are singing the theme to the Mickey Mouse Club. There's just something perfectly absurd about that.
Well, and they tweak it a little bit,
early on. Yeah. But I love that. Like, as soon as they were doing that, I'm like, okay, end it. It's like, there's no better ending to this. And the movie is full of great music. Great baby boomer era music throughout. But yeah, I thought that worked. I thought the whole movie worked.
Yeah, and especially now that we've kind of recapped it, I'm going to read the synopsis because I think it does a good job of wrapping up what we're saying. The IMDb plot synopsis is: a pragmatic U.S. Marine observes the dehumanizing effects the Vietnam War has on his fellow recruits, from their brutal boot camp training to the bloody street fighting in Hue. But it ends like it's the dehumanizing effects, and that's what better way to encapsulate that than executing this wounded person, from Joker. Very effective film, a lot of violence.
Yeah.
But there are scenes in this that are just iconic, and there's I haven't seen movies that do some of these things that well, but pretty much ever.
Trivia time?
Sure. So in the first part of the movie, in the sequences inside the barracks, I don't know if you noticed this, during the drill, a special lens was designed to keep every single recruit in focus. Stanley Kubrick intended that no one was special and they all had the same treatment. So he wanted them all to be in the same focus.
Well, this makes me want to do a brief digression on Stanley Kubrick and cameras.
There you go.
So Stanley Kubrick was making a film in the mid-'70s called Barry Lyndon, which is about a 18th century philanderer who works his way into not quite nobility, but close to it. And he wanted to shoot it like paintings of the period, which meant that he wanted to use natural light, which was candlelight. And to have a camera that could use weak candlelight and still get everything, those weren't common. In fact, the only people that had a camera that good was NASA. So he made arrangements to borrow camera equipment from NASA to shoot his film, which sometimes is spiraled into that urban legend that he filmed the moon landing. That's like, okay, you can have your cameras for Barry Lyndon. We have another project for you first.
Stanley Kubrick had nothing but praise. We touched on this earlier, but I think it's worth reading anyway. He had nothing but praise for R. Lee Ermey's skills as a performer. Kubrick originally was going to write dialogue for Ermey's character himself, but became so impressed with what Ermey improvised he decided it was not necessary. He simply let him ad-lib, an act particularly unheard of for a Stanley Kubrick film. Ermey's performance was so faultless that Kubrick only needed 2 to 3 takes to get his scenes filmed, which was also extremely rare for a Kubrick film. The only instance Ermey had to film more than 2 or 3 takes was in the jelly donut scene, which he claimed was filmed in 37 takes, to the point his voice kept disappearing from time to time. There was one scene that was cut from this movie after it was originally filmed, and it showed a group of Marines playing soccer. The reason that the scene was cut was because the shot later revealed that they were playing, their soccer ball was a human head, not a ball. But I think it was probably the right decision to cut that.
Yeah, I would say so. Fuente Ovejona did it. Jackson will get it.
There you go. According to an interview with Vincent D'Onofrio, the production schedule for the film was so drawn out that the lead actor Matthew Modine got married, conceived a child with his wife, the child was born, and then turned 1 year old, all during the course of filming.
Wow. I was disappointed by the lack of special features on the DVD, because this is a film that's crying out for him.
Yeah. R. Lee Ermey said of Vincent D'Onofrio's performance that it was not only the best in the film, but the best part of the film as a whole.
That's fair.
To make Gunnery Sergeant Hartman's performance and the recruits' reactions as convincing as possible, Matthew Modine and Vincent D'Onofrio and the other actors playing recruits never met R. Lee Ermey prior to filming, and Stanley Kubrick saw to it that Ermey didn't fraternize with the actors between takes. That's a thing that was been used in other films, again, Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers, to great effect. Vincent D'Onofrio gained 70 pounds for his role as Private Pyle. Again, I alluded to this earlier. And that breaks Robert De Niro's movie weight-gaining record of 60 pounds for Raging Bull, a record that still stands as of 2020. It took him 7 months to put the weight on and 9 months to take it off with physical training. He noted that his new look scared off women, and people would often repeat things to him, thinking that he was mentally challenged. His shirt, Private Joker's shirt on Paris Island, reveals that his actual name is J.T. Davis. It is a deliberate reference to Specialist James T. Davis, the first officially recognized U.S. casualty in Vietnam who was killed in 1961. R. Lee Ermey was actually involved in a Jeep accident during the making of the movie. At 1 a.m. one night, he skidded off the road, breaking all of the ribs on his left side. He refused to pass out and kept flashing his car lights until a motorist stopped. In some scenes, you'll notice that he does not move his left arm at all. Kubrick claimed in an interview that it took 4.5 months before Ermey could return to work, in which production simply had to be suspended since he was involved in all of the remaining scenes.
Well, the Vietnam sequences were filmed first, and the training was filmed second.
Yeah. The inscription of "I am become death" is written on Animal Mother's helmet. This is a quotation from the
Agata Vita,
spoken by Robert Oppenheimer after the explosion on the first atomic bomb at Alamogordo. And I think that's pretty much all that is worth reading out of those. Interesting things about the filming. This movie, like you said, it seems like a movie that was screaming for some special features and things of that nature. Because there's clear, I mean, in the trivia there was other references to documentaries that have been made about the filming of this film. So there's clearly plenty of information out there about things related to this film, which deserves, for further revisits and things, documentaries to be made about it. Very impactful, very iconic film.
And for Kubrick, short, at just about 2 hours.
And kind of surprising to me, only nominated for the one Oscar, which was Best Screenplay based on material from another source, or adapted screenplays.
That's hard to believe. I mean, there's, and Vietnam films, like the other major ones.
It didn't even win either.
Yeah, but it's this or it's Apocalypse Now as kind of the great Vietnam film, and I think it might be this, because Apocalypse Now is a little more arty.
Mm-hmm.
This felt truer. And then, of course, the Oliver Stone one that won an Oscar that's extremely famous, and whose name
is
my brain
both of
refuses to... Platoon.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen Platoon?
Again, not in its entirety.
It's not as good as this. This was really good. Again, the first bit is so strong that it kind of overwhelms the second bit. The second bit has some real good stuff in it, especially as it progresses. I would give this movie 4 stars and 9 out of 10.
We're in agreement. I would rate it the same.
And then the 9 is simply because it just couldn't quite sustain that wonderful first third.
Yeah, I agree.
But I recommend it. It's not for everybody.
Yeah, again, it's very violent, those types of things. This has an 8.3 star aggregate star rating on IMDb, has a Metacritic score of 76, and this, if you've been listening to recent episodes, is in the IMDb top 250. It's currently actually number 103. However, when we recorded movies 100 through 51, it was in the top 100 at that time.
It has a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, and deserves it. Any other thoughts on this movie?
I think we've said what we have to say.
Yeah, I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.
Edit.
You should probably move in a hair more.
Let's, okay. Are you recording over something?
The stuff I already recorded.
Which was?
You setting up the chair and me setting up the computer.
Oh, we lost some thrilling audio.
Yes, I presume so. But this is sufficient for levels testing, so. Yeah.
Retrieve.
It'll come to you right as you pull it up. You know, well, maybe not for you. Ranking movies this month is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I think you'll appreciate my final pick, but I don't think it'll be your top. I think you picked the tops for this month.
Okay.
So, clearly you didn't like my first choice, my World War II choice. Mm-hmm. You got an advertisement for us?
It's brought to you by RC Cola and the Mickey Mouse Club and Stars and Stripes.
That works.